care and, teach about racism too, these crises have been difficult for me. And I really wanted to be part of this panel to share my experience, but also to learn from everybody else's experience, because I think, we're all in it together. And I'm hoping to learn a lot and share what I can today.
Excellent. Well, we're so glad to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today and for saying yes. Our next panelist is Tara Yang. She's an entrepreneur and brand marketing professional, currently building her own social marketing business. Her family's owned a small business in the heart of downtown Green Bay for more than 15 years. She attended the University of Wisconsin-Madison and graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Science Communication and 2 certificates in global health and entrepreneurship. Tara has worked on scaling small minority-owned agricultural businesses across the Midwest for the last 10 years and continues to do so by volunteering her time. She's also previously worked in the marketing departments for major food brands like in the Midwest, including Organic Valley. And she continues to contribute to the community by participating as a member of the City of Green Bay's Economic Development Authority Committee and working towards developing the city's first food policy council. Hi, Tara.
Hi, guys. Thank you so much for having me today.
Can you share with us for just a minute about why you said yes to joining us today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thankful to be here today to have a platform to speak about some of the experiences that my family and I have gone through during this pandemic. And unfortunately, it was some racial harassment that we went through. And I'm here to share about how we coped with it and the resources that we used to get through that. So that's why I'm here today.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us, Tara. And lastly, we have Macy Herr, who's a PhD. And after many years as an educator, corporate trainer, and community leader, Macy joined the Hmong, Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce as the executive director in 2018. The Hmong, Wisconsin Chamber of Commerce is a community development financial institution providing assistance in business planning, market analysis, marketing strategies, effective day-to-day business operation, and more, and acting as an advocate for Hmong and Southeast Asians regarding business and economic issues. Furthermore, a forum to really for Hmong entrepreneurs to discuss successes and challenges and offering support in a win-win for all of Wisconsin. Macy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Andrea, for having me. And it's wonderful to be here with Tara and Ben as well. And I look forward to hearing what they have to share also. And I know you asked a question about why we said yes to joining this panel today. And I'll just say, as you know, I've just always been very passionate about issues of race and culture and in the community and finding ways in which I could use my experiences and voice to, enhance or better situations for all of us and bring about a more equitable, community. And now, of course, being with the chamber, I certainly, am looking. I'm often thinking about economic justice, and so in its intersections with race and culture. And so with this whole pandemic going on, of course, all of those things intersect, and I'm forced to have to think about ways in which I can help the community. So that's my day in and day out, and I'm just happy to be here.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And again, all of you, thank you so much for giving us your time and your attention as you sort of bring these issues to light and help to educate the rest of our community members here in Green Bay about these kind of issues and how they are sort of specifically impacting Asian communities. So thank you. Mm-hmm. So our first question is, how has race and culture intersected with your experiences during the pandemic? Who wants to start?
I'll go ahead and start, since that seems to be a good segue from where I left off. Where has race and culture intersected with my experiences during the pandemic? As I mentioned, I'm over at the chamber now, and we just very quickly started off as a Hmong Wisconsin chamber because many Hmong entrepreneurs and startup business owners really felt like they need, especially a few generations ago, felt a need to have a place where people who understood their culture and that they felt they could go to and that took them seriously, where oftentimes they would go to, for example, a traditional bank, and they felt, their words, that they weren't taken seriously, as business owners, and they felt like they needed an advocate for them, and also someone that they could really truly have, deeper conversations about their needs. And so, so here we are, but now we don't just serve the Hmong community. We focus on the Asian American community across the state. And of course, we also serve, low income, historically underserved areas. So just so we all kind of know. Okay, so with that, obviously, with my job right now, I've been very concerned. There's some language barriers, there's cultural barriers. Some of the most veteran business owners in the state of Wisconsin through this pandemic have had a hard time trying to figure out, how to help themselves along financially, even with the financial assistance through public and private funds. They weren't always aware of what was available to them. We'll just say, a lot of times they were left, they were a few days behind, all the money would be gone. And then they would come to me and say, hey, by the way, is there any funding? I heard there might be. And I would end up telling them, oh, I'm so sorry. The funds are gone, and they've been gone a few days now. I would have loved to have helped you, but we would be happy to see what we can do the next round, but we don't know when that will be, and so, those were the types of discussions I had day in and day out for quite a while at the beginning of the pandemic. And so, there's certainly some intersections there with everything that's going on.
For sure.
Yeah, and jumping off of what Macy was saying about language barrier, I think especially during this pandemic, I think it's really tough for our elders to really be out going into the public, feeling safe. And so I think race kind of plays in that, because we are Asian and because of the misinterpretation of the COVID-19 virus. I think people associate Asian with virus automatically. It doesn't matter where you're from. And so I think our safety is one of the biggest concerns for us and for the elders around the community.
Yeah, I'll jump in with something actually outside of Green Bay. Actually, for a lot of the pandemic, I was in New York City because that's where a lot of my family is from and is. And so I went there actually because my father was ill with COVID. He actually eventually passed away from it. Mm-hmm. And the last week of his life happened to coincide with the week of curfew in New York because of the protests after George Floyd's killing. And one of the striking moments of that was George Floyd's brother came to New York and essentially delivered a eulogy in front of thousands of people. And I think what struck me during that time was it was the first public mourning I'd seen during this whole pandemic, even though even at that point, over 100,000 people had died. And I don't know, I think that's something that we've missed and that we're continuing to miss, is that a lot of people are suffering in different ways. And though there's recognition of the struggle, there hasn't actually been much public recognition and kind of in ways of mourning publicly. So I think that's something that we need to pay attention to.
Thank you for that. What have been your greatest concerns around the pandemic, and particularly in respect with your cultural identity and heritage?
Go for it, Tara. Tara, go.
Well, I think that's a great leadway into one of the situations that my family and I experienced. And what that was some of our business property was graffitied on with racial slurs. And when we brought that up we reported it to the police, and we made sure that they documented it. However, it wasn't reported as a hate crime or a racist crime. It was reported as an opportunistic crime. And so that's one of my biggest concerns, that microaggressions or any type of harassment, racist harassment, is going to be miscategorized or it's going to be minimized. And that's a big disservice to the community, because that says to the perpetrators, hey, you're not going to get punished for this. It's okay to do it. It's not, it's not something that they're going to get in trouble for. So it's kind of enabling the perpetrators to do those crimes. And so that's my biggest fear and concern, is that, these, no matter how small or big these racist crimes or harassment is, it's not getting taken seriously.
And I would agree with Tara. I'll just even say from a personal note, as someone, I just moved to Milwaukee. I'm a native Wisconsinite, but just moved to Milwaukee in December. I didn't get a whole lot of time to adjust to my new position before the pandemic hit. And then, of course, it was being called a Chinese virus and all of that. And then it makes me all the more afraid to go out, not knowing who's out there and where people are. Where I was I was quite comfortable when I was living in Wausau, not just because it's a smaller area, but I was very familiar with the community. But here now, being in Milwaukee in a larger urban area, and then not knowing where anything is, it makes it, and then of course, like we said, with all of the sentiments against Asians and Asian Americans, it's made it even more, and then of course, having a child, that makes it even worse. You don't want, it's one thing to be out there on your own, and then to have children, with you, and young children. And so unfortunately, it just made it, especially personally, difficult to go out really anywhere, even just to a store. And then of course, COVID on top of that. So, just those layers of friction and that have made it very difficult. Not only on a personal note, but we've seen it on a professional level, of course, with the small businesses that we work with. And it was probably Tara's family that we certainly heard about as well, Tara. And so we've been, trying to document some of those situations. And I think all the more important to document, so that there's a pattern of these types of behaviors that we're all collecting and that we can pass on to to law enforcement or whoever it might be that could actually hopefully do something.
Ben, do you have anything to add?
I mean, just on a sort of more broader level, right, there's that concern. This situation has laid bare a lot of needs, both in terms of racial justice and in terms of public health needs. And I think the awareness is out there now, but there are other forces at play that, make us wonder whether this is something that where we come out of this stronger, or whether this is something that just fractures us more, right? So, my hope is, I do have hope that we will come out of this stronger, because there is so much awareness now. And so.
Well, that's a good segue into our third question. Are there any cultural assets that have helped you to navigate this pandemic? Attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors that come from your cultural background that have been helpful?
I'll start this time.
I think it's your turn.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this. I think when I was thinking about some of the lessons of my father, and I think this is owing both to his personality, but also his sort of Confucian upbringing, was that he never worried a lot about other people's motives. He was focused on his own actions, and he was very much focused on other people's actions and their impacts. If somebody did something that bothered him, he didn't theorize about why they did it. And I found that that's been helpful. There's this phrase that a lot of people use now, impact, not intention. And I found that thinking less about other people's motives and beliefs has been helpful for maintaining my sanity during 2020, when a lot of people aren't acting the way I'd like them to act. If I just focus on why what they're doing and why I think it could be improved, that's more helpful for me and addressing them than in thinking about where that might be coming from sometimes. So.
I'll just, I'll mention that one thing, the pandemic has really, in terms of what we do at the chamber, working with small businesses, knowing many of them were impacted, that we really, our staff really thought deeply about how we can connect with our small businesses, whether they were members or not, because at the end of the day, it's about these small businesses and making sure that they had the resources they need financially and otherwise. And we really, through the pandemic, social distancing, trying to follow CDC guidelines, we still found ways to really travel to where the people were. And to meet with them, because we know that in some cases around the state, there are people who are saying, well, is the Hmong Chamber really for us? Is the Hmong Chamber, they don't know who we are. Not everyone does, and that's okay. So we really took the opportunity to go out and meet them and to see them and to explain to them personally what types of resources were available to them, whether that was in-house or outside of our chamber. And we felt, and one thing we know about many Asian groups, and most certainly within the Hmong community, is that we're very willing to accept. All you have to do is extend a hand. So we took that to heart, and we went out there and talked to a few people, and then that word spread really quickly to the rest of that community. And before you knew it, we were going back and forth and getting calls from those individuals and their connections about ways that we can help them. And so we thought that was a win-win, most certainly a win-win situation all around.
That's a really interesting sort of cultural piece of Hmong culture and maybe some other Asian cultures, to be really willing to accept if things are offered. And that's definitely different than many other kinds of cultures that are here in our community.
Well, yeah, and I know Tara was going to add in, but I was just going to say too that, we often say that within the Hmong community anyway, that I always say, I don't have no math to back this up, but I always say it feels more like 2 or 3 degrees of separation. So once it's not 7 degrees of separation. So as soon as you impact somebody, the ripple effect is huge. And so we really took that to heart. And like I said, we just ran with that, and it's been a wonderful investment for us.
Cool. Tara, sorry to...
Sorry.
No, I love those points. Those are valid points that need to be said and made. So I'm glad that you said that. I was just going to say that something for what I noticed is that in our Hmong culture, we're kind of quiet. When the situations arise, we kind of sit back and say, well, we don't want to get involved too much because we don't want trouble. We don't want the drama. However, I think now that it's putting Asians in forefront of the drama, I think it's pushing us to come out of our comfort zone and to speak up about, demanding respect, demanding to be at the same level as everyone. So it's kind of pushing us out of our comfort zone, which I find that is really good for us. I think that's good that we're stepping up and standing up. So, yeah.
So I'm curious about this piece about sort of being quieter and wanting to kind of stay out of drama and maybe stay out of the limelight. Is that a sort of cultural coping mechanism with being immigrants, and particularly with being refugees, that you just kind of don't want to make waves in your new community? Or is that something that is sort of longer standing?
I think it might be a little bit of both. I think just because that's kind of how the culture we learned to grow here, we grew up in, was kind of like that. So it's just a tradition thing that we kind of do. But I think now that with the newer generations, we're more outspoken. So, it comes with a little bit of where our parents came from, how they grew up, and then also, nowadays how we live and how the new generations are kind of refocusing and learning to speak up more. So it's a little bit of both, I think.
So the next question is, where did you find support through the pandemic? We've all needed it. I think everybody has struggled in some way or another to kind of find some new connections and some new ways of going about their lives during the pandemic. Where are some places that you found support?
I have found that as I've tried to reach out, that others are reaching as well. Everyone, well, so many of us are trying to reach out to one another for similar reasons. We want to be able to connect in a time when we have to be socially distant and should be quarantining and all of that. And while we have Zoom, it's not as easy to just run into people. Well, now it's much easier because there are ways that we can inform people that there are virtual sessions for this and that and everything else. But you know, that has made it a little bit easier, just knowing that the others have similar needs to reach out and to connect with people also. But I think that was, to start with, that was a little slow moving until people realized, you know what, it's okay to reach out and others are reaching too. So and that's not quite answering your question, but I can say that certainly has helped the process of connecting.
I have definitely missed with Zoom the kind of easy chit chat, before meetings and in hallways and those kinds of pieces that I feel like we don't get the same kind of level of that on Zoom and the kind of personal connection. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tara or Ben?
One of the things that I brought up earlier was just how to report these harassments or report what has happened to the person. I think maybe, like Macy was saying, reaching out to someone and learning about where to report these, how to report it, why it's important to report it. I think that's one thing that would definitely help educate the community about racism and educate them on how to deal with it in the long run. So collecting all the data that all these situations that happen really would teach us how to navigate it in the long run.
Yeah, so one thing that was surprisingly helpful I mentioned my father was ill, right? During the end of life care, we had our palliative care physician happened to be Chinese. And even though she didn't speak the right dialect, so, but just having someone there who understood some of the customs around burial and death and what my mother's concerns would be with my dad's end of life really helped, and it comforted my mother. And I think that's something I'm also on the Bellin Health Ethics Committee, and we think about language barriers a lot, but I think there's less attention to some of these cultural understandings that are really important during what's probably one of the hardest decisions people have to make. So I'm hoping to take this and help make it easier for other people too.
I also think,
go ahead.
I was gonna say, during this time when there's so much focus on the Asian American role in everything that's happening with the civic unrest and the civil unrest and the with the pandemic and it become and basically blaming Asians for the virus, and it has made it so, as someone who's Asian or Asian American, it's forced, I think, many of us to really reflect on or be confronted with where we stand on some of these racial issues. And then, I have felt, personally, I felt uncomfortable with the whole, with some of the finger pointing that has gone on. Are you with us? Or are you not with us? And I'd like to think, I happen to take the approach of giving everybody the time and space that they need to figure it out where they are at. And rather than assuming that I know where people are at, so anyway, but I think it's so important for all of us to really reflect on, just all of these issues that we're being confronted with. So having said that, I'll just end it on this, that it's been very important to have very strong connections, good relationships with people in my life who have helped to center me and have reminded me of why I do what I do. and that it is connected to all of these racial and inequities and issues that we're dealing with. And I think we all need people like that in our lives.
Have there been sort of racial inequities that have sort of particularly come to light during the pandemic that you've noticed?
I think that, like I was saying before, because we're a little bit quieter of a culture, that we aren't taken as seriously when we speak up about some of our concerns. So I think that that kind of brought to light about how we need to go about and handle situations that are brought up by certain groups. I think that we've seen this year that if there's a community that brings up concern for justice or brings up just any type of concern they have, and it's not, there's no resolution found to it, that group or that community will act accordingly to get the attention that they need. And so I think that that's an important lesson for all of us, that if there's a community that has issues or problems and they bring it up, we need to sit down and listen and really talk through it and see how the other communities can help this particular community who has an issue, instead of letting it get so big until it leads up to riots. You know, we need to do better and be better as a community, and we need to come together and help each other more and listen.
Mm-hmm. So then the next question is, what's something that you hope that the Green Bay would, our community here in Green Bay, that we would hear, that we would listen to, and that we would know about or do? The big question.
I don't think this is unique to just Green Bay. I think this is true everywhere. That one of the biggest challenges is just being very intentional. Being intentional and making sure that there are spaces for conversation, lots of dialogue, but also for opportunities to listen. Obviously, being intentional in our hiring efforts, who's at the table, but not only bringing people to the table, but actually allowing a voice. Just having someone at a table is not enough. And so we know that through years of experience that, just having someone at the table, just as whether that be as a token or something else, is just not enough. It's truly listening, authentically listening, and applying some of the ideas that come about from having a diverse, for example, board or staff or committee or whatever the situation might be.
Yeah, I agree with Macy on that. What Green Bay is starting to do, the city is implementing a diversity position for one of their teams, but I don't think that just having one person on the team is the resolution. I think that there needs to be more action. I think I was reading the job description, and it said something about writing some value statements, but, like Macy said, we know that in the past that just writing something down on a piece of paper, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't do its justice. You have to get out there and you have to talk to the community and get eye to eye with them and understand where they're coming from. And that's how you will find solutions.
Yeah, I totally echo what Macy and Tara said, and probably more important than what I'll share, but on sort of just, there's this meme out there, it comes from Amy Chua. It says, do you know what a foreign accent is? It's a sign of bravery, right? That person had to cross an ocean to come here. I guess I would also add it's a sign of intelligence and resourcefulness. And I think if we just kind of made that the default view, we'd be stronger as a community and smarter as a community together, yeah.
I have not seen that meme. That's great. Are there other things that you'd like to add? Are there things we haven't talked about yet that you want to make sure people that you have a chance to say today?
I'd like to add just, to any of the audience members, if you guys ever run into any situations, you don't be afraid to reach out to your community leaders, people who work for the city, people who work for organizations around town, the executive directors. People are willing to talk to you and speak to you and help you find a resolution to whatever situation you're going through. So don't be afraid to reach out. They will always be there to listen.
I also will add that, we have to make room for representation, diverse representation all along, different levels of management and of the workforce in any sector. And that's so important. We know that there are studies out there that say, it's through diverse boards and committees and staff organizations that they achieve. We know that. So, and it's good to ask questions. Andrea, you might have heard me say this in the past, but it's so important that we are willing to be uncomfortable, find comfort in our discomfort. And when we are wrong, that we're willing to, put forth humility, and that's okay. That's part of the learning. That's for all of us. Check ourselves, every single one of us. If someone tells me that I shouldn't be saying something or I should be thinking about something or providing me a new perspective, I have to step outside of myself and realize it's not just personal. It's probably not personal. If someone's saying something to me, it's probably because it's something they have dealt with or faced more than once. And others may feel the same way. And we have to be willing to listen and, be in a place where we don't always feel comfortable.
Yeah, definitely that piece of sort of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable has certainly been a lesson that I've had to learn in sort of doing any kind of diversity work and really trying to kind of understand where other people are coming from and the kind of experience that other people have had. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for being here. We're a little early, which is, I think, just fine. I really appreciate your time, Macy, Tara, and Ben, for being here and sharing with us your perspectives and your experiences during COVID-19. So again, Ben, did you have something? No? Again, to the audience, thank you so much for joining us for our Stand Against Racism series here at YWCA Greater Green Bay. YWCA is on a mission to eliminate racism and empower women. And we're so glad that you were able to join us today in that mission. So have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
There we go. Thank you, you guys. I really appreciate it.
Are we still live on Facebook?
Nope, we're off.
Okay. So is it Andrea
It
or
says
Andrea?
live.
Oh, where does it say live still?
It still says.
So it says we're live.
Oh, now it says that Ben is the host.
I'm the host.